Okay, welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly roundtable show where we discuss all things fire service related. Tonight we're going to have a close call review involving a church fire. So we ask you to, follow along, see where you can do it. If you are watching us live on YouTube, feel free to leave a YouTube comment and join us, and we will bring you right into the conversation. So let's start with some introductions first and foremost. So I am Pete Lamb. I am the author of PeteLamb.com, and I'm the host of the Firefighter Training Podcast. Also your host here for Firefighting Today. Warren, say hello.
Hi everybody, Warren Whitley, a retired Assistant Chief from Prince William County, Virginia Fire Department, and currently retired in North Carolina.
Okay, thank you, Warren. Rob, say hello.
Good evening, everybody. Rob Fling. I'm the chief of the Dix Hills Fire Department on Long Island, as well as the founder of Face Peace On.
Perfect. John Cagno, say hello.
Hello, everyone. John Cagno, retired battalion chief out of North Providence, Rhode Island.
Okay, Greg.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Howard. I'm the deputy fire chief for the Dashwood Fire Department on Vancouver Island in Canada.
Thank you, Greg. Ethan, say hello.
Hi, Pete. Ethan Bansick from the city of Lorain, Ohio, student of the trade and founder of Pass It On Fire Training.
Thank you much. And Joe.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Pronesti. I'm with the City of Elyria Fire Department, where I'm assistant chief. I'm a shift commander, and thanks for having me on.
Well, we'll get back to you in just a second, Chief. You're going to be the host here. So, Adam, say hello.
Good evening, everyone. Adam Ganway, captain with the Kellogg Fire Department here in Kellogg, Iowa.
All right, thanks for being here. Good panel. I think Charlie's going to join us just momentarily here. So tonight we're doing a case history review. I'm going to turn it over to Chief Pronesti so he can go through it. If you have YouTube comments, please put them in there. Let's let the Assistant Chief get some ground underneath him before we ask questions. I'm sure he'll take questions as we need to, but let's let him get some ground under him before we get too many questions. And without further ado, let's just have Chief Pronesti. Let me get your stuff up there. Everyone on the panel, can you see these slides?
Yep.
Panel can see slides, so I'm assuming the viewers at home can see slides. So, Chief, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay. Tonight we're going to take a look at a close call we had at a church fire, which took place in my city on June 27th. Of this year. It was a Saturday morning, and we had a heavy rain event through the night and into the morning, which may play into a little bit of the thought process as we go through it. Just a little bit about my city, city of Elyria, Ohio. We are about 30 miles west of Cleveland, northern Ohio. My town has roughly 56,000 people. 21 square miles. We are commercial, mercantile, residential. It's a great town to work in. It has a lot of variable types of buildings. We're old for the most part, and that also comes into play a little bit later on as we go through this. So we're an old commercial, mercantile town, Rust Belt, typical Rust Belt city. Economically depressed, a lot of unemployment. We do not run EMS, strictly fire. We do some first responder. A little bit about my department. We have 60 career shift personnel, 3 stations. We run 3 engines, a truck, which is a true truck company, no tank, no pump, 1 shift commander, and an SUV. And like I said, we have a economically depressed area. We do not have minimum staffing. Whatever shows up for the ball game, we go with at 8 o'clock in the morning. They tell us our minimum is 13, so we can keep the 3 stations open. But we don't have anything technically on paper. We have to call the chief for the staffing number. We have, when we are at 13, we have 3 engines with 3 members on it. The truck has 3, and then the shift commander. On the day of the fire, we were at 13. Okay, A little bit about the building. It is in our northernmost section of the city. And in the city of Elyria, the northernmost section, there is a large community college that was built in the mid to late 60s. And this church is probably within a half a block of that community college. As you can see, I'll have a later slide kind of cutting it up as to each section, but rather large complex, and it is a rather has a pretty good sized congregation. There's a little bit of a sketch off of our county auditor's website. A little tough to see there, but here's the church area, and this area to the right was classrooms, offices, and then back here where you can see me moving a little bit here is was like a gymnasium and cafeteria, and not cafeteria, but like a large open area you could have dinners and receptions, a hall, the best way to describe it. Here's the A side. We have a large parking lot. Again, there is the sanctuary to the far left of your screen. AB corner. The sanctuary was not that large, but pretty wide open. There's the Bravo Charlie corner. There's the Charlie side. No windows on the Charlie side. Here to the left of the, where you can see my little cursor here, was the hall. Large open gymnasium area, kitchen. It's a little bit better overview. Again, it was built in the early 70s, and there were firewalls in between. As you can see by my red line there, between the sanctuary and the gym and the hall, there was a firewall, and again, you can see the wings, no fire protection, and as I stated, there was a heavy rainstorm, and there was some lightning. However, that was not the cause of this fire, but as you could probably put together, that when the alarm rang at 7:15 during a heavy storm, that's probably for smoke coming out of a church, that's probably one of the first things that you're probably thinking of. That the call was called in by a passerby. The church sits on a very busy road, and a passerby called at 7:15 and said that there was smoke coming out of the church. The closest engine, Station 4, three-man engine company, they are probably about a mile and a quarter away. They got there at 7:18, and their radio report was that they had moderate smoke showing from the eaves and the attic area of the church, that they were going to do a 360, and they were going to basically get back to the rest of the incoming units. In my city, a structure fire call gets all three stations, so the three engines, the truck, and the chief were all responding. The chief, the truck, and an engine responding from the main downtown station were probably, they're a good ways away. Probably it's at least a 5 to 7 minute run from the downtown station. The engine company that day, and it does come into, again, a lot of these things that I'm overviewing we will talk later about, but the engine company, again, the three-man crew, none of the three members were typically assigned to that station. The three members were all from the main downtown station. The acting officer was a firefighter with, roughly 12 to 15 years of time on the job. Very good, very knowledgeable, good firefighter. He had two younger members that were probably, I want to say, probably only 3 to 5 years on the job. So they've radioed, they got smoke, they're doing a 360, and this is just kind of a simulation of what they had. Again, they had smoke from the upper part of the peak of the church. nothing in the wings, and again, they were going to investigate. The firefighter went back on the radio and said that they were going to stretch 1 3/4 inch. Our engine companies carry two 200-foot 1 3/4 pre-connects and a cross lay, and in the back they carry a 300-foot static or dead load of 1 3/4 and 600 feet of static 2.5 that is available for rapid hose line. It's in a horseshoe. It has a nozzle on it. It's ready to go for offensive attack, and then we carry 600 feet of 5-inch supply.
Chief, if I may interrupt you before you continue.
Sure, please.
Just a question on the construction. Was this the original configuration of the church when it was built, or was this gradual add-ons?
Original configuration, well, the sanctuary, that's a great question.
Like that center gymnasium, was that added on after, or was that part of the original construction of that?
The original sanctuary was original. The classrooms, the gym were added on, but all within a couple of years of each other. Probably this was all finished and done by the mid to late 70s. It's again, so the original building was built around 71, 72, if I believe, and the rest were all add-ons very quickly. But yes, you are right that the gym and the hall was kind of built in between, and yeah, it was pieces, parts in, but it was done in a very short period of time.
Okay, thank you.
This was a couple pictures taken from, well, I guess basically from people in the area that were posted on Twitter. The shift commander arrived on scene. The engine company, which I will show you in the next slide, but I wanted you guys to see, this was very early on to the left and to the right, again, within a few minutes of each other of what was transpiring. This slide we're going to spend a little bit of time on here. This was the setup of the companies. The engine company, Engine 4, there's a man door that led right into the sanctuary. After the officer did his 360, they laid 1 3/4 and went in this man door. The shift commander arrived, set up his car right here. Again, many lessons. I will say that in my department, each shift commander kind of does their own thing as far as where and what they do, sitting in the command post or moving around the structure. This particular commander, excellent, very knowledgeable, has been a command level officer since 1996. And a couple years back, when our chief decided to explore the blue card training, staying in a fixed command post, it's still a work in progress. But this commander for this fire decided he was going to get out of his command post and take a position near the tower in Engine 4. Two members of the Engine 4 took that 1 3/4 in. The commander had Engine 1, which is the downtown engine that arrived with the tower, and the incident commander take a line into this front vestibule area that, as far as cutting off, he was worried about fire traveling. Weren't sure about firewalls, so he wanted some, to make sure. His thought was, okay, we got to cut this fire off. When Engine 4, they caught a hydrant. They had a supply line laid to them. Good water. There was no issues with water. Water in this area was very good. The officer of Engine 4, when he went into the sanctuary, it was clear as can be. He said that he had no fire, no smoke in the sanctuary. Although it was clearly evident from the exterior that they had a fire, he was reporting no fire. The tower set up right there, as you can see, a rear mount bucket, they started. They were told by command to prepare for operations. The incident commander over the radio stated to all units that he thought that there was rafter construction, was pretty much his exact quote. And to interpret that, he basically thought that this was old legacy construction.
Question here, Chief, for a second. Question.
Go ahead.
Did that first crew bring a thermal imager with them? Was there any use of thermal imaging early on in there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, get to it when you can. That was a question raised. Okay,
yeah.
Fine.
All officer positions in the fire department carry a tick on their SCBA. He did have it on. He did use it, and I will get to that in 1 second.
Okay, great.
So the assistant chief, the command, when he announced that it was rafters, he ordered the tower crew place their bucket on the roof, and he was going to do ventilation. He wanted them to cut a hole. He also wanted them, because again, it's a strictly truck company, no tank, no pump. We have to pump into it. He had the third engine, engine 3. There's a hydrant where my little cursor is. They laid into that, and they laid a supply to the tower and pumped into the tower. One of the other things that we ran into, not a big deal, but why I have this one up, the supply line going to engine 4, it twisted, and there was a lot of radio traffic that will come into play in the next slide when we talk about it. But there's a lot of radio traffic between the hydrant butt man and the pump operator of engine 4 because the 5-inch supply was twisted. They had to unhook it. Well, naturally, guess what was coming? Water. And there was a lot of radio traffic that I'll talk about here in a second. This is just a snapshot, excuse me, snapshot of the collapse. The collapse occurred basically within 20 minutes of the event. We have in a city with our dispatch, we have a county dispatch system, county dispatch, central dispatch point, and they have what's called a watchdog. And every 20 minutes, they will call command, and they will say, you are 20 minutes into your incident. It is 20 minutes from the time of the alarm. At the 20-minute marker, engine 4 radioed that, you know, they had no fire, no smoke. Again, they stated that early on. But they then stated that the ceiling was starting to come down on them. That was about 5 seconds after dispatch called command with the 20-minute update. And again, that was 20 minutes from the time of the call, which was at 7:15. So they arrived, so this was at 7:35 roughly, so 17 minutes after the arrival of the pumper, engine 4, was the first collapse of the interior ceiling of the sanctuary. And narrowly missing both the 2 members of the crew that was in there. And very calm, very coolly, the engine 4 officer called command and said, ceiling's coming down, we're backing out. And they backed out into where my cursor is. There's a door, and again, into this hallway or the level of the area where the classrooms sit. And they were very lucky. Had they been deeper in, they might have been cut off. There was no Charlie door. There was no other way to get anywhere else. And very, very lucky, because a large section of the interior ceiling came down on them. Bottom line is they had heavy fire conditions rolling above them. Because command, it stated he thought there was rafters, the tower crew was about ready to get on the they were ready to ventilate and open this up, and for whatever reason there were some delays and some miscommunications. There was a lot of radio traffic, nothing excessive, but just typical firefighting radio traffic, and for whatever reason, thank goodness they didn't get on the roof at the time. When this picture was taken with the collapse, this was a video taken from a resident of an apartment complex to the rear, but the video basically, it is very, I don't want to say cool, but it is very educational in the fact that you can see when this collapses the rush of air and pretty much how each section of this church just basically lights up. And again, very, very lucky.
Why don't we hold for just 1 second there, Chief? Let me just speak to the viewers for a minute. If we are watching live, some of the YouTube viewers, you've seen a good part of the presentation. Feel free to send in your comments, ask a question. We'll be happy to bring that into the panel so that we can share that information, certainly. There were 2 questions that were important, Chief. One of them, I believe it was Greg, was talking about type of attic space. So roughly, what do you think the loft space was above them? And the second part of that question was, what was that ceiling? Was it sheetrock? Was it plaster? What was the composite? Are you going to get to that, or can you address that now?
Yes, I am going to get to that. It was drywall.
Okay.
It was 5/8 inch drywall. The reason why command, and again, these are all the lessons that the reason why I wanted this on your show was to help others, obviously. And again, commander felt that this was not a truss constructed building, and because the sanctuary, the walls went right up, there was very little truss loft. And as we go further, I'll show you a picture.
So there was scissor truss, is what you're saying, Chief?
It was. It sure was. It was not rafters. It was truss.
But there was scissor truss. You said there was very little truss space, so there was scissor truss versus
Yep.
trusses with a flat roof. So you had a vaulted ceiling?
Very vaulted. Yes. Yep. Yep. If you're okay, Chief, I'll go
Yes,
into a little
no,
bit.
absolutely. Yeah, continue.
Okay. So, I was on duty the next day, or that day, at 8 o'clock we changed shifts. So this fire call came in at 7:15. When I was getting ready for work, I knew this fire was taking place. I got in a little earlier than usual, try to organize some things, and I responded out about 5 minutes to 8 after the collapse, and they were defensive. I started talking a little bit with the crews, and like I said, the lieutenant of the acting lieutenant said the amount of fire visible on arrival was minimal. He said he had smoke, light gray smoke, no velocity to it. He wasn't pushing, but inside that scissor truss loft, it was full of fire, and we know that now. One of the things that he felt he should have done, and again we'll talk about, was pulling some ceiling near the wall to see how much fire you have above. And then I also will talk about a thermal imager here in a second, but our engines, you know, everybody says they're an aggressive department and all this and that. You know, our engine companies, and in my town, they pull the line, they go in and they put the fire out or try. They don't carry hooks with them. We have a dedicated truck company. And so the mindset is not there to take in those kind of tools. So the firefighter and that officer, while they had, you know, the hose line and a set of irons with them and a light and all those good things, they have a hook with them because that's just not what we normally do. It's somebody else's job. And again, that'll lead me to something further here. But that was one of the biggest things, was he wished he had pulled the ceiling near a wall So where basically the vaulted ceiling came down and met a wall, you could reach it with a hook or something, or even an axe, open as high as you can to see if you have anything. Inside-outside reports are key. There was a little bit of, again, some issues when the most hectic time of this fire was going on. Again, there was a lot of radio traffic with supply lines and charging of hydrants, and just again typical radio traffic. And maybe, in my opinion, sometimes in a serious fire like this, firefighters need to understand radio discipline. It's too much to expect it when the fire is going on, in my opinion. You have to train on it and you have to talk about it. Now, the last thing is cues. One of the biggest lessons, and one of the things that I try to use, is construction, use, era, and size. And if you can think of those four things, you can put together a pretty good puzzle of what's in front of you. Construction. We have a newer church, again, the 70s. We know what was going up with trusses and that around that period. Use. It's a wide open span. It's a sanctuary. So, the church with that type of use, you have to expect something like trusses. Era. This is the big one. This is the one where if you're watching this or listening or whatever, you have got to know the era of your district, of your city. In my department, we have a lot of young firemen that are not from the town. And it's different from when I came on. I was born and raised in the city. The members that taught me were from the city. So they were able to stress the era of the buildings in regards to the area or the district. The district that this is in exploded and sprouted in the late 60s. The fire station that was first in on this was built in 67. So everything in this whole area was late 60s through the 70s. And if you don't know for sure, the construction we have to assume is truss until we decide otherwise. But everything, if you look in your towns and you have, a building like here, a large college campus, community college campus, was built in 66. Everything went up around it. So again, era is a big thing. This church, being in the 70s, could have different construction than our large Gothic churches near our downtown, near our main street. And again, like I said, Illyria's an old town, but the churches in the center of town were built in the 1800s, early 1900s. Their construction's going to be a whole lot different than the church that was built in late 60s, early 70s. And so those three things, I think that I'd like to point out that really to utilize cues, size of cues, I guess you could call them: construction, use, era, and size. How big of the building is it? As far as hose line stretches, air supply, all those type of things. Thermal imaging. The big issue was the acting officer had his tick. He turned that thing on right away. Again, he is an excellent fireman. I would crawl down a dark hall, smoky hallway with this guy any day. He took his tick out and he shot it. And the one thing I think we need to realize is they're not X-ray vision. Most ticks operate using relative temperature difference, and that is the comparison of the things around the tick. So the area, because he had no smoke, no fire, no heat in the sanctuary, although it was cooking like a grill above him, when he pointed that tick, it never went above 122, he said. And a lot of it also was insulated by the 5/8-inch drywall. So he wasn't, while not at a loss, he knew he had some fire, Let's go back to the very beginning. Thunderstorm, heavy rain. You had some smoke. So maybe the thought process was, okay, we got it lucky. When this got struck by lightning, we arrived quickly. It's a small fire. But it wasn't that. It was rolling. The ceiling came down on those guys. Just barely missed them. We lost some hose and their nozzle. But they had 100% visibility until all hell broke loose.
Why don't you hang on for 1 second,
Sure.
Chief? You made a difference here, so thank you, Chief, for being with us. Lane is a battalion chief out in San Diego. He likes the acronym Q's and he's going to use it. So you made a difference already, Chief. You're one step closer to that T-shirt.
Well, thank you. Again, it's very hard. I don't know if you guys on the panel run into this, but when you hire firefighters, and I'm not against whatever, it is what it is today. When you hire firefighters, I think the next big training push needs to be on, or think about how well educated are they in the town. We're just not hiring firefighters from the town. And I think we owe it to them. If you're an older salt on the job, we owe it to teaching the younger members your district and the buildings. Staffing. Yeah.
You bring up a good point. You can even, like you said, you were born and raised in that city, and so was I. And I'm from a smaller community, only 5 square miles, and you would think that you would have been in every building in that community at one time or another. But you can be a firefighter for a number of years in a community and never get into a building, and that's why you make a point of we owe it to the younger generation to get them in there, get them into different areas of the district. But if you're stuck in the same firehouse for a number of years through assignment or whatever, then you get a promotion or a transfer. Probably the most important thing you can do first off is to get out and learn the district, and that's critical. And getting back to era, when a building was put up is totally relevant to what you're going to do when you're planning your attack. That building could have started off, like I said, that's why I initially asked the question about was it a continuous add-on process, because when we got on the job, it might have looked one way. Here it is 2-3 years down the road, it's a completely different structure. So to me, that's a very useful point regarding when it went up and the era.
Yeah, one of the things that I agree with getting out and getting into buildings, and we got hundreds and hundreds of buildings in my town, but to narrow it down to this, I suggest you do that. One of the things that at least helps me is, again, the era. Most cities, old cities like mine, the hub was the main street, the downtown, and everything was built out around the downtown. So anything close to the downtown in my city, as an example, is old construction. Whether it's type 4, type 3, ordinary, it's old. As you go out to where I live in the city, the area I live in was one of the last new sections added to the city. The homes were all built in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Well, and there's a couple strip malls near me. Well, I would tell a fireman, okay, maybe you haven't been in that building or in that strip mall, but all the houses are new, right? Yeah. Well, what do you think that strip mall's going to be? So I think you just, again, the era, you can basically take a map of your city and at least have a good guess on what you're dealing with. And those guys didn't do anything wrong. Again, these guys, I have a very good department, excellent guys, very smart. But again, we don't see this kind of fire, and I am very big on learning from the experiences of others, because my department has not had a church fire, and boy, the last church fire we had was struck by lightning, and we knew it was truss, and it was rolling upon arrival. We didn't even think about defensively. and it was a newer church. But you know, we 10, 15 years ago, you got a whole generation of guys on my job that weren't even there that day when we had the first church fire. So, you know, again, this isn't the same. We can't cookie cut. Staffing. I think the chief that was in charge that day, if there is a lesson that I think he felt that he may have maybe erred on a little bit, was the staffing. We never called for mutual aid. My department, again, these are no excuses, but I'm sure there's plenty of departments like mine out there. We used to have 21 men on duty. Then we went to 17 men on duty. Now we're at 13 men on duty, or whatever shows up. And we've always prided ourselves on, this is, in my opinion, wrong, and I do everything I can to try to change this philosophy of we can handle it. We're the big city in the county besides Lorain, and we can handle it. We don't need to call for help, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's totally nonsense. And you can't think like that. You can't operate like that. You're going to kill somebody. And so on this particular day, we never called for mutual aid. I think maybe the other thought process was, a lot of times we have a fire at shift change. You know, we got 13, 14 more guys coming on duty within minutes. You know, well, okay, we got a whole crew coming in. Maybe we can get by, or, you know, we call members in from home, but we never called mutual aid. And we have a very aggressive, very good mutual aid box alarm system that can get us the help. And, you know, they could have been there. And had that ceiling come down, or trusses pin those guys, we had nothing left. Nothing to get those guys out of trouble. Like I said, we cannot treat our fires in a cookie cutter fashion. And one of the best, I guess, if you want to search YouTube, or at the end of this, I have my email address, and I'll send you this PowerPoint with the video. But one of the best videos I saw was a video of retired Chief Mike McNamee from the Worcester, Massachusetts Fire Department. And he had sat down, and he was being interviewed. I believe it's a NIOSH video, or it was from NIST or something. And he was talking about how the report, the NIOSH report, and the lessons. And he went on to say that the Worcester Fire Department was very good at fighting fires in three-deckers. Now, some of you guys on the panel know what, you know, exactly a three-decker. Maybe you can explain it, because I don't have three-deckers. But he was saying that they were very good as a department and aggressive at the three-decker. But when their fire happened, for those of the listeners, Chief Mike McNamee was one of the bosses that had responded to the Worcester Cold Storage Fire in December of 1999, where 6 firefighters died. He basically said you can't cookie cut, and that when that building and that fire occurred, that they may have looked at it like a three-decker. And in the city of Elyria, Ohio, we have more residential than commercial fires, and you just cannot fight the commercial fire or the church fire or whatever, you know, any type of non-residential in that same fashion. And you know, we were very lucky. I think there was maybe some, you know, you do some things automatic, and again, we had a lot of younger members working that hadn't been to a lot of commercial or you know, church fires or whatever, non-residential fires. And unless you train and you talk about it a lot, until you experience it, again, you can get into that cookie cutter mentality. And again, there's the chief, he's talking about it. I encourage anybody to kind of research it. It's a good video, and it makes its point. Okay, there is the trusses of the church. These pictures were taken after the fact. There you can see the scissor trusses, if you will, and the amount of fire. Now, this is actually looking towards the classrooms. So this is you're actually the open area here is the sanctuary, and these were the trusses going back that towards the classrooms. But these were the same scissor trusses that held up the sanctuary, and you can see it's about the same. It was the same type of loft, if you will, except that the drywall was nailed right underneath the scissor trusses.
So I am standing on Bravo looking towards Delta. Is that if I
You got
underneath
it.
that peak is Delta? Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
You got it. You got it. But the trusses that was the same. Those were the same trusses.
Right.
Same space. Gusset plates. I've got some great pictures of the gusset plates, and if you can see the picture on your left, those were the actual gusset plates of the church, of the trusses, and you can definitely tell how they pulled out of the, you can tell the creosote and the damage, and how when they heated up, they pulled out. And I just thought that was a really great picture for a little building construction. And again, we don't have much time to talk about it, but look up a gusset plate and what they do under fire conditions, and this was a pretty good example of that.
It also shows the time it burned too. If you go back to that slide a second, Chief.
This one?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does. The one to the left, if you look at the, that was probably a union between a 2x6 and a cord truss. So I mean, but there's a decent amount of char there, and both plates are still together on that particular segment.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may, I'd just like to relay a similar fire we had in a newer bank building, and it had only been built a year prior to the fire. And when the morning of the fire, when the call came in, everybody was questioning, that this was odd because we were getting numerous calls. But the funny thing about it was when we entered the front door of this particular bank building, the tellers were still at work. They weren't even aware that the building was on fire.
Wow.
And in short order, we started hearing, this like tinkering sound, and it was actually the gusset plates falling from the ceiling. But the roof held, and I think the difference was that, we got the call quick, probably within minutes of the fire starting. Whereas in your particular situation, it looks like there was an extensive pre-burn time, and I noted that by that view of the church, the aftermath, where you could see the purlins above the trusses. If you zoomed in on that back section there, you can see that the purlins above that truss, the depth of char. So there was an extensive amount of fire in that church ceiling for probably a long length of time prior to you guys even getting a call.
Well, and that also goes back to size up, and when the engine company pulled in the parking lot, there was nobody there. So that's another great point you make, Chief, is that when the bell rang, it's 07:15 on a Saturday morning to a church. When you pull in, there's no cars. So you have to think that this thing might have been cooking all night long. But
Exactly.
It just so happened that we had a heavy storm going through the city at the same time. So if I was on duty and I was driving my little buggy there and going, I'm thinking this church got struck by lightning.
Struck by lightning, yeah.
But it wasn't the case. But and I won't go into the cause and all that, but it was not lightning. But my point is, those factors have to come into play, when you're responding. So, ladies and gentlemen out there listening and watching this, think about the time of day. I think that's sometimes one that we forget about as far as, in a commercial building, it probably could be burning for quite a long time if you're pulling up in the middle of the night or early in the morning.
Yeah. So, Chief, I'm going to put one comment up, and then I want you to make sure you get through because we got about 15 left.
Sure.
Let me just get this one. This is from Chief Woolery again. Some common denominators with the Southwest Inn fire in Houston. Well-involved concealed attic space, burning longer than anticipated, major failure early. That's another one. If you have not looked at that fire, you clearly need to Google that fire as well. Nice catch, Chief. I appreciate you throwing that out there. So go ahead, Chief. Why don't you continue? Let me get rid of that.
Perfect segue. And
Yeah,
I'm going to give a plug to Chief Lamb. If those watching this aren't aware of his podcasts, the Chief puts out a weekly podcast, and they are some of the best education around while you're running or doing your whatever. And they're perfect. They're great. And it just today, the Chief talked about using NIOSH reports. And I did not know that that was what today's podcast was until I listened to it myself today. But I added this section here because my department, as most departments, you have levels of passion and those that read a lot and those that don't. We're no different than any other fire department. We can't kid ourselves. And some guys dive into every NIOSH report, others won't. We did not do a very good job, and I'm trying to change that. But after this church fire, I printed out, I knew immediately that this reminded me of Muncie, Indiana. And in 2011, a firefighter lost his life in a church fire after a roof collapsed. The interior crew, look at that second bullet, initially met with visible conditions, light smoke, and no visible fire within the church. Conditions quickly changed after walls and areas of the ceiling were opened, exposing a fire-engulfed attic space. It was a little late after the boss called for them to evacuate this building, and the ceiling collapsed, trapping and killing a firefighter. Again, if you want more information and the audio of this and the NIOSH report highlights at the end, let me know. These are some of the things, but I talk about the NIOSH report in my department. When I printed it out, the guys were like, wow, this was just like Muncie. I can't believe it. We dodged this was exactly like Muncie. Yes, and I kick myself because maybe I should have done a better job. One of Chief Lamb's big things is, and it really is, it hits home, is that when he says, when someone, to do something about it, do something about it. And I really am trying to make it my goal to do something about it, but not only myself, but as many people as I can will listen to me. And maybe had we done a better job as a department disseminating and training on NIOSH reports and talking about them, that maybe those that responded to this call would have immediately brought up that NIOSH report and thought about those things and thought about wide open spaces and church fires and so on. But these are the contributing factors that burned in the NIOSH in the Muncie, burned undetected within the roof void space for unknown period of time, similar to Illyria. Roof collapse, just like Illyria. I think that the boss there did in my town, again, he's a friend of mine, good guy. He's taught me a lot. I think I would have done the same thing. I think he thought that, he kicks himself about guessing on the construction, obviously, but he wanted to cut it off. The rest of his tactics were, I think, spot on, and I would have done the same thing. That the sanctuary might be gone. We got to cut this off and save the rest of the building, which they did. High risk, low frequency incident. Again, we can't cookie cut our fires. We cannot cookie cut them, and it doesn't mean that you have to sit and drill on the large mill fire if you don't have mills in your town. But it does mean that you have to educate your people in the construction aspect of buildings and the commercial versus residential. and high risk, low frequency, and then rapid fire progression. I think that the fire in this roof, and it may have been burning for a long time, but like Muncie, had rapid fire buildup. And once that fire got a little air at both cases, especially in our church fire, I think once it got some air going, it really took off. When I said about how members were nervous about the difference between the similarity, the picture on the left is Muncie, and the picture on the right was the Elyria Church, and pretty similar. And again, quickly get through this a little bit. You can tell the similarities it struck me as just mind-boggling. I guess we've been answering some questions. Chief, I apologize if I took up a lot of time, but if there's my email, if I can help you in any way, or if you want the PowerPoint and with the audio or Muncie information with their audio, just send me an email and I'll get it out to you.
Yeah, great job, Chief. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to leave that slide up there for just a second. Let's leave that up there for just a bit.
Okay.
And guys and gals, if you're watching, you can always pause the video and make sure you get that section of the Chief's email. So why don't you come back to screen? We've got a limited time, and I'm going to take Warren. I'm going to talk to you here for a minute because I want to hear about. It is a common tactic, and I've long been a fan of poking an inspection hole. But what is the risk? You made a great analogy in the chat room that I think has to be made. When you begin to make an inspection hole in a ceiling from the underside of a well-involved place, depending upon size of the hole, etc. What are my risks? Yes, I need to take a look. Yes, I need to get a thermal camera. But what are my risks of adding air from below?
Well, if you think about that attic now, it's full of fuel. And if it's been cooking for a while, you had light smoke showing. So you know there's a fire up there. So one of the things we see is the firefighters will go into places like this and they'll leave all the doors behind them open to the exterior. So now we have a flow path potential. So even if there's no inspection hole, that building's trying to breathe anyway, so we're bringing more air into it. When you do an inspection hole without controlling the air behind you, now we've released the plug to the bathtub that's upside down above our heads. That fuel's going to come down. Hot rich smoke's going to lean out. It's probably already at thermal ignition temperature, and you're going to have a fun time. So, I'll just throw these out there. There's a couple of different ways you can look at it tactically. If you know it's bottled up in that space, use other tools you might have, such as a piercing nozzle or something, to introduce water to help enter that fuel up in that space. If you do want to still do the traditional inspection hole, make sure the doors behind you are closed so we don't have that new flow path, and don't cut the inspection hole without water right there with you. And if you think about this, that man door is right at the edge of the structure, so I can make my inspection hole right at that doorway area. So I'm in, it won't be a completely safe area, but I have some sort of haven there. If the ceiling comes down, I'm not right under it. So I can do inspection hole, introduce water, try to get it inverted. Because even if I knew that was a non-truss roof, I'd really doubt at that point I would have tried to cut a ventilation hole. Simply because, regardless of the type of construction, you don't know how long that fire's been eating away at the structural members. Unless you can cut it from the if you can cut it from the basket, that's a consideration. So just a couple of things to think about.
Yeah, I agree totally, and that inspection hole is great with like a strip mall or any type of lightweight construction. I think the thing that here was two things. The ceiling was vaulted, and it was at least probably 15 to 20 feet high, I guess. And so it would have been extremely difficult to get any kind of holes up there anyway. Plus, this particular church, newer churches don't have what older churches have, and that's a rose window or any kind of window on the A side where you can throw a stream through or do whatever. Very limited on this fire. It was just I think it was a loser from the get-go, no doubt about it. But I think a lot of us probably would have done a lot of things what they did there, and it's all about learning.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing the info. I think that's important. I think we need to do that, and that was key to me. The other thing I just want the listeners to understand, and we won't be able to get through everything here, but one of the things I want the listeners to understand is a fire in a truss building is dangerous. A fire impinging in a truss space is a fire ground emergency. That's a difference. It's a truss building. Okay, I got that. I'm with you. But if you do make some opening, or you do see with the thermal imaging camera that you have fire impingement in a truss space, that is truly a fire ground emergency. And again, radio traffic needs to do that. There's some comments in the chat room about maybe the gable end. Maybe we could do something. I'm assuming. What was the structure, Chief? Was that a brick veneer on a wood frame? What was the deal on the? It
was a concrete building with a brick veneer. The front. So anybody thinking that maybe that they'd be able to get up there and cut a hole in the gable end might have been tough. They might have been able to do it, but it would have been tough. It was not a wood frame with a brick veneer building. It was a brick building, with a brick veneer.
Okay, good. So that was a question. I think we should leave it there, folks. I think that was a good session. I would ask our panelists certainly to go to the Firefighting Today page and take this link and push it out. This is a great training session we had here tonight. We should do more of these. I think this is really only the second one. I think Greg did a sort of a partial collapse one, and now this one. So I'd ask our folks on the panel to push this out. And thank you, Chief, for really doing a great job with this. I think it's the brave sharing of this kind of information that, hey, it happened to me. There for the grace of God, it could happen to any of us. I think that's something that should be applauded. So
one last thing, if I could say real quick.
Sure.
One other lesson: get chief officers your eyes and ears around the building. Something else that we did not do, and I kicked myself for not getting there quicker. I waited until my shift started, so there wasn't, any kind of animosity or problems. But you got to call for lots of eyes and ears at a building like this, and get different sector, get a Charlie sector up at the minimum.
Yeah, I think the other thing that you said that was really pure gold was, and you look at all of these major fire incidents as you're looking at them, inside versus outside reports. The roof's telling you one thing, the commander's telling you something different. The interior crew's got nothing. And when you talk, let me think for a minute. An interior crew with really no serious conditions and a serious fire in the attic sounds a lot like Hackensack, New Jersey to me. And conflicting reports inside, outside. That's always a challenge. That always made the hair on my neck stand up as an IC when somebody's saying, I got it, and the conditions belie that. So I think that's an issue. So just a reminder, we will be here next week. We have Kevin O'Donnell is coming on. He is going to talk about a product called HydroVent. It is a new piece of equipment. He wants to explain that and expose it to the group and the listeners. So we will see you next week, next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. I appreciate everybody participating.